Hi, welcome back. It's Rob Bowron with Sharp College Football. I'm really excited today. We're going to talk about as we run through the previews. I'm excited to be back again. I took a bit of a break, sort of concentrated on work, doing other things other than worrying or thinking about college football for a while. But I still continued to do the projections for the year. I got the schedule file in. I'm all set up to go for FCS and FBS for next season. And so we're running through the preview videos. And unlike years past where I've sort of done it in like 10 to 1, 20 to 11 kind of setup, we're just going right in a row and counting down. I'm going to try to knock out as many as I can of these as we get into before we get into the season. I'll commit during the season to doing a Saturday 6. The scheduling may change a little bit more. I'm committed to going out to LA for work once a month. I live in Columbus, Ohio. It's not a fun flight. It's worth it. I get things out of it, but it's not a fun flight. This is what I would get out of a Big Ten, USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten is a direct flight that's not on Spirit, because I'm not doing that, to LA from Columbus. That'd be an enormous win. Like, if we could somehow make that happen, that'd be grand. Anyway, I am excited to be back for this. I'm excited to preview LSU. This is the first time in the endless monotony. I mean, that sounds really harsh. Endless monotony. The dominance, the monotonic dominance of Nick Saban in Alabama, has come to an end. They are no longer favored. In beta rank coming into this season to win to be the tops in the SEC West. Now, they didn't win it last season. LSU beat them. I think one of the things last season, of course, is, Alabama came down pretty significantly on the offense. I mean, I think there's definitely some blame laid at the defense's feet as well. But the biggest fall off was, from where they had been in recent years, was on offense. I mean, the fall off from where they had been under Sarkisian to O'Brien was immense. So, and they just hired Tommy Rees at Alabama and Mike Bobo at Georgia. Two really interesting, but that sort of sets things up really. I mean, like, I am excited for this college football season because I think things are going to be really wide open in college football for the first time in a long time. I genuinely think if you look at sort of like the juggernauts right now, one of the things that I think we should look at and sort of take away from it is there's not, an offense in general in college football. I mentioned this in the last video. And if you were watching last season, this was something I brought up too. Offense last season was down points per drive for the first time in a couple of years. Now it's likely, I don't know if we're going to see points per drive. Points per game is likely to come down again. There's been some rule changes that will slow the game down. Cut down on the number of drives that teams have in a game potentially. But the per drive scoring coming down was was pretty interesting, I think. And it's one of those things like we saw two offenses get above 2 in beta rank, which is sort of the threshold I sort of like, off the top of my head are like, that's a really, really good offense. We had 2 last season, but nobody's in the range of nobody's touching 2019 LSU. Offensively, but we didn't have anybody really torching things. And the teams that, Al Grant, like Georgia's last year was a really, really good football team. And they were the year before too. But Georgia's going to take a step back offensively with Bobo as OC. I think Rees I don't think he's a huge improvement over O'Brien, if he's much of an improvement at all. I mean, his Notre Dame offenses tended to underperform their talent level. I know a lot of people think that's not true. You're wrong. So And there are a lot of people that really like what he does with his X's and O's. That's fine. He just still, relative to his talent level, didn't put a lot of, and the talent level they were playing against, didn't put a lot of points on the board. And I don't know. I mean, that's kind of an important part of the job. But that sets up really well for Brian Kelly, who is pretty offensively stuck. and I say this is like, and I got to have a bit of a mea culpa, because in previewing LSU last season, I was like, oh, Brian Kelly hired the offensive coordinator and Mike Denbrock that he literally had to fire at Notre Dame. And who, didn't light the world on fire when he was the OC at Cincinnati. And he came in, and then I said, now I did say, I'm going to caveat this. Like I did say, like some of the caveats I threw out last season actually turned out to be right. I don't think that really gets me out of having to eat some crow here. That Jaden Daniels was probably like the perfect quarterback for the Brian Kelly, Mike Denbrock offense, which is not a throw the ball down the field offense. And if the quarterback can add anything into the game with his legs, is a major win. And that worked. And like Daniels, if throwing within 7 yards of the line of scrimmage, is going to get a pretty decent completion rate. If you ask him to throw the ball down the field, results may vary. But he did, they put him in a position to be really successful. Sort of like what he was in his first season at ASU, where he tended to throw short quite a bit. If you look at Ayuk stats for the one season that they were together at ASU, he led the nation. He may not have led the nation, but he was, if you looked at him compared to the other guys in that NFL draft that season, he was led far and away the most yards after catch. The game was get the ball into playmakers' hands and then they run with it. And Daniels was pretty good at that. There's some bad with Daniels too. But I think he is a service. In this offense in particular, this is a really good matchup match for him scheme wise. And he's a really good match for what they're going to try to do. Right. And I think that's one of the things about when people would say at Notre Dame, Brian Kelly, couldn't recruit top quarterbacks or something like that, and that was a major limitation on the offense, that was nonsense, right? You're telling me you can't get a decent, high 4-star pro style quarterback with an arm to come to Notre Dame. Brian Kelly recruited guys that were all pretty athletic and not great at throwing the ball down the field. And those are the guys he recruited at Notre Dame, right? Now, we'll see once Daniels is gone or if he gets injured this season, how that's going to play out, I think, with the offense of the future here, if he's able to change. But for the most part, it's the same song and dance, right? With Kelly there. And I think that's, it's largely going to work here. I think the defense worked really well with Matt House. And I think with with what they've got returning on the offensive side of the ball in particular, and if they can improve special teams, which were sort of lackluster a bit last season, I think LSU has a chance to be pretty good, challenge for the really truly challenge for the SEC this coming season. And they are sort of a trendy pick. I think one of the most important things we talk about this is, because people are going to focus, I think, on personnel losses at Georgia, some personnel losses at Bama. But the main thing is that just, and I'm a bit different in that, I try to point out that actually, guys, coaching really does matter. Georgia and Alabama went out and made some head scratching OC hires, and that's going to open up the door. That's fun in college football. It is a little bit of a bummer because I do find the era of really big offense fascinating. The fact that, a handful of coordinators like Lincoln Riley, Steve Sarkisian, had been able to really get out, break the mold and put up a ton of points. That was really fun and interesting, I think, in college football. Really different. And I think put a lot of pressure on the top programs to try to compete, because all of a sudden the distance between, Alabama with the Sarkisian offense, and everybody else was a lot, or that LSU team and everyone else was a lot. And I think that as an evolution of the sport was fun to watch. I'm interested this year. There's a chance that Sarkisian figures it out. I think it really depends on his quarterback there, but we do still have, Steve Sarkisian is in college football and is still calling plays. And he's not at, he's not at Wyoming. He's at Texas, so he's going to have some players that can, that should be able to put it together if they, can figure out what he's doing, which I got to say that the quarterback last season didn't always know. That said, and I think, you've got Lincoln Riley now with Cliff Kingsbury, right? Like, I feel like that should be like on the packaging for like USC, which if there's some bright news amongst the horrific athletic director news, it's, if you're a USC fan and you just want to focus on X and O's and not that the people in charge at USC are yet again impossibly incompetent people, and possibly morally derelict. If you want to focus on just X's and O's, like getting to see Cliff Kingsbury and Lincoln Riley together as sort of a mad scientist duo, that's incredibly exciting. Kingsbury, of course, put up one of the best college offenses of all time when he was at A&M, the year that Johnny Manziel won the Heisman. That should be really fun to watch. There's the possibility, of course, that like those teams are out there and dangerous and interesting. I mean, we'll see where USC's defense shakes out, whether they're even, in the conversation. I think you could say that Texas's defense took tremendous strides, steps forward last season. I think but like LSU because Alabama and Georgia are in this place, you don't have to suddenly come up with you don't have to make that enormous step forward offensively to be able to compete. Now, Tennessee is a potential wild card out there. They did get an offense above 2 last season. Their defense, which has been holding them back, wasn't great last season, but they made significant strides. If they can make significant strides again, Tennessee is a real big dark horse again, and people are going to talk about the personnel. I think that Art Briles offense is just going to and I think with Heupel, they're just going to figure it out, and they'll still be really good offensively. I'm excited to see where Tennessee lands this season too, but LSU's in a really good position coming into this year. So yeah, there's my mea culpa. I'll eat some crow. It worked better than I thought it was going to. I thought it was hilarious when they hired Mike Denbrock. I mean, but to be fair, I think it's hilarious that Georgia hired Mike Bobo and Tommy Rees is now the offensive coordinator at Alabama. That is a different step than I would. And it's, to be fair, it's not like game-changing OCs grow on trees. And even Notre Dame couldn't get Andy Ludwig away from Utah and had to settle for a guy that got fired at West Virginia. Yeesh. All right. Anyway, let's actually talk more about LSU. So for Kelly, they finished number 6 last season overall in beta rank. They were number 19 and 21. I will say again, last season, Georgia was able to put some distance between themselves and the pack. And you really did, of course, see that last year in the way teams finished out in beta rank. Ohio State, there were some teams that were, of course, still really good last year. Ohio State's offense was really good. Georgia's defense wasn't as good as they were the year before. But their offense took a big step forward. I don't expect them to sort of be in that same range. LSU, even at number 6, there was some distance between them and teams at the top, and you did see that at points. But that said, still really good season for them overall. I think if you're an LSU fan, you had to feel really good about the year last year. They were improved. They were at number 19 and 21 in Orgeron's last season. They sit at number 16 overall in coaching and development. Not a ton of that's in Kelly, in the Kelly range. More of that is, a lot of that's still from the Orgeron, which is some really good and some really bad and some last miles, which was, mostly kind of in the range of where you might expect if you recruit in that range and you run a Neolithic offense might sort out at. They're number 31 in returning production this season, but they've got a ton coming back on the side of the ball where returning production matters most. That's in Bill Connolly's returning production numbers. They, of course, sit at number 5 in recruiting. that always helps quite a bit. Number 33 in special teams last season. That is something to watch out for a little bit. Keep an eye on that one, just because last season their place kicking wasn't great. It's certainly something they can improve on this season. If you can't be leaving, if you want to win the SEC, if you want to, win a playoff game, you can't be leaving points on the board. You have to have solid place kicking, or else you have to have just an amazing offense and defense. And I mean, I think LSU is going to have to improve on special teams to get there. I don't think, even with everything I've said, like they're not going to light it up offensively. They're going to be they're still going to be a very good college offense, but they're not going to be like what I would describe as like the era of big offense type offenses. Of course, that's Brian Kelly. I haven't updated the pictures. I'm getting back into this as quickly as I can. Anyway, let's hop over and talk about the offense and defense. Literally sipping the tea of eating crow. So, and here's my chance. I mean, last season they finished at number 9 overall on offense. Of course, Mike Denbrock's your offensive coordinator. They struggled a little bit at drive efficiency. Sitting at number 20 overall. So they were at number 35 the prior year. So this is a significant improvement for them, getting all the way up here, up to 9. And there's a chance for them to, I think even improve off of number 9 here a little bit. But they were, of their overall numbers, they struggled a little bit with drive efficiency. That's putting together long drives to be able to put up points. They were at number 9 in explosive drives. When they did put up, they did tend to get more of their points from putting up big plays. Number 12 in play efficiency, though. So outside of explosive drives and being able to put together drives to put up points, this is, outside of explosives and negative, really bad plays, putting up a solid yards per play. It's the least important of the core 4 beta rank metrics, but still counts in the system. Number 8, negative drives, avoiding 3 and outs, avoiding turnovers, avoiding having the defense or doing stupid things or letting the defense do bad things to you. Solid number for them as well. Number 13 in effective rush. They were pretty good running the football overall. Jaden Daniels, of course, contributed some to this. Number 16 in effective pass. For them to improve, I would say they're probably going to have to improve on both of those. College football, there's lots of ways to skin the cat. You can run the football and put up points. 2019 Ohio State was a run first football team. Really had service academy type rush, effective rush numbers. There's lots of ways to skin the cat. They could become more effective running the football as well. One of the things, Jaden Daniels last season, a 68.6 completion percentage, but only 7.8 yards per. And that's telling you something that we tried to talk about. We have a Pac-12 podcast, try to talk about with ASU fans before Daniels went to LSU, that Daniels is, people would throw out the overall number. Like Daniels is at his best. He's going to have the higher completion percentage when he's throwing shorter. He doesn't have the arm and the accuracy to really to throw the ball downfield all that well. That's not, and I say this is college football, man. He's going to be fine. People always ding Peyton Manning for his, arm strength. Now the accuracy was always there, but he's fine in college football. This is not a problem in this offense. Also not a problem. They don't ask him to do that a lot. But just in comparison, of course, what we talked about last time is Daniels and, Stetson Bennett have a similar completion percentage. But Bennett's throwing for almost 2 yards more, per completion, just getting the ball down the field more. Daniels is not going to be expected to do that. And here's an interesting one. I think Daniels, in rushing situations, the offensive line was really good. They were at 3.25 line yards, according to Football Outsiders metrics on college offensive line efficiency. The other one, though, is they had a 10.1% sack rate, and that's rated at 123 overall. Sack rate, people are going to say, the offensive line. Sacks are really more of a quarterback stat. Daniels can hold the ball a little bit too long. He does, and in the Kelly offense, often they're not asking him to throw the football down the field. Teams are covering up short. Now, he can also add a lot with scrambling and everything like that, but that sack rate is something to keep an eye on and watch out for with them. As we talk about their drive efficiency number, that is part of the problem, right? Like, too many sacks will kill your drive efficiency. Sacks are often drive killers, right? They're at number 10 in returning production coming in the next season, 81% according to Bill Connolly. That's a really exciting number if you're an LSU fan. Returning production is more correlated with offensive production the following year than is defensive returning production. Its recruiting is a little more correlated with defense. I think that's a really good sign for LSU that they're bringing all these guys back. Again, like this offense could jump up into like the 5 range overall. I think that, like I talked about with where the SEC is, like might be enough unless Josh Heupel might be the only real big bang OC running around. Although Liam Cohen's back at Kentucky, I don't know that he's going to have the horses. But might be the only big bang offensive coordinator running around in the SEC. LSU, that should be enough. To put them absolutely in contention. Defensive side of the ball, Matt House is your defensive coordinator. He came in from the NFL after a couple years in college. He came back from the NFL to coordinate the defense. He did a really good job. I do want to call it again. They were really good the prior year as well. They were at number 14 in 21. Defense wasn't really as much of the problem in 21, and they were improved over where they were the year before that, the COVID year. As well with the DC in 21. Number 11 overall, they really struggled with drive efficiency. So they struggled to find ways to get off the field. This is, relatively speaking compared to other defenses, they gave up a lot of points here. Now they did do a good job. Now these are all scaled, and I try to point these out. I scaled these defensive numbers to what it looks like versus in the offensive metric space, because the offenses are just often, like you put the number 1 offense against the number 1 defense, the offense is going to put up points. That's the world we live in, right? So like, I want to scale this as like, if you put them up against the very best offense and drive efficiency, what's that going to look like, right? Now, the most explosive offenses in college football are often still putting up big plays at a rate that like much more than teams are containing them. But they did a really good job in containing explosive drives. That tells you that this defense, I think, in a lot of ways was, if you peeked, if you're cheating and peeking down before I talk about it, the effective pass versus the effective rush, they were a lot better at the back end. You could run on these guys. Teams that you can run on, this is sort of like the flip on, right? Of like, who often leads college football in drive efficiency? The service academies, like 3 yards in a cloud of dust. They do put together long drives to put up points. And they're often near the top of effective rush. Teams that struggle to stop the run, often not so great at drive efficiency. You can often put up drives against them. Sort of like go together, like peas and carrots, American apple pie. Pretty good play efficiency. Number 2, controlling opponents' yards per play. Pretty good at negative drives, forcing 3 and outs, forcing turnovers. The effective rush number, of course, is not great. I grade Power 5 teams on a 1 to 65 scale. If you find yourself sitting in the 30s, you're a pretty mid-level Power 5 team at this. So like finding yourself lower than that's obviously really, really bad. If you find yourself in the 70s or 80s, you are a very, very bad Power 5 team at something. But they were really good at defending the pass. And that was, I think, is a key for them. Coming into the season, can they maintain that? Because defensively, they were pretty good last season. They put up disruptive plays on 23.6% of plays, and that you can see that reflected in that negative drives number. But they gave up a first down on third down 39% of the time. That's not great. That's a pretty good conversion percentage. If you compare that to like Georgia, who only allowed 26% third down conversion, that's a big difference. So again, like their drive efficiency, like give up a lot of third down conversions, not so great at stopping the run. Like, yeah, teams are going to put up drives. But they did and I think this was some personnel and that they didn't have the bodies to necessarily stop the run. I mean, you would certainly choose to stop the run if you could. And I think they struggled with it a bit last season. But we have seen teams gravitate more towards playing to high safeties, really trying to stop giving up big plays. And LSU was better at that last season as well. So let's hop over and talk about the schedule, because it's a tough schedule, but they're favored a lot. All right. The return trip, Florida State. So this one's going to be really interesting. Florida State, if you weren't paying attention last season, I'm assuming if you're watching me, you were likely paying attention I'm sort of a deep cut, if you will. Probably even more of a deep cut after taking some time off. Florida State's a really interesting team coming into next year. They return a ton of production. They're number one in Bill Connolly's returning production for next season. Offensively, they started to really put it together. Defensively as well. Florida State projects to be pretty darn good next year at number 5 overall in beta rank. We have LSU as a slight favorite on the road. I mean, just at 2 points, a little over 2 points. It'll be interesting to see. I've tried to talk about this a little bit, with scoring potentially coming down with some rule changes. Some of these spreads are going to tighten up a little bit over where these are, which are just built off prior year's data, and like a posterior distribution of what the model distance would be. So I would just say for these, they'll probably, when we get into it, it'll probably be a little tighter than this, which might be telling you that this game, which is already really close, is going to depend on, home field is going to be important here. I would also say, what could be critical is, as I talked about, is whoever wins the turnover battle might end up winning this game. A little bit of luck here, a little bit of luck there, and you're going to have that could definitely push you over the top. They then also go on the road to Mississippi State. I should also say beta rank doesn't include games against FCS teams for FBS teams. And we do, if you add in one here, we do have LSU projected at 10.5 wins, 7 wins in the conference out of 8. When you start to get into that projection, you're talking about, really a decent chance that they go undefeated. And there is, for LSU, there's a decent chance. There are some tight games in here as you're going through. Their toughest game, on the schedule right now is probably that Florida State game as it appears. But some of these could end up also being a little bit tighter. They luck out. They don't get Tennessee, of course, or any of the real monster teams out of the East, or even a potential weird dark horse. I don't even say Kentucky's a dark horse team. I just think they're an interesting team with Liam Cohen coming back as OC. Anyway, they get a Mississippi State team that is likely going to be a bit different. They definitely have some production losses off of last season. Of course, they have the tragic coaching change, there, and they'll, what Mississippi State will look like will be a very interesting question coming in the next year. LSU should be a significant favorite here. Don't turn the ball over 2 or 3 times and you should be fine. I think that's also largely true for Arkansas. They're getting this Arkansas team at home. 3 possessions here maybe is a lot for Arkansas, but I think LSU should be able to put it to them next season. In large part because of just everything LSU is bringing back on the offensive side of the football. They should have some cohesiveness. That said, Arkansas is a team that I think has some real positives, I think, on the offensive side of the football that they could be building to as well. We'll see. There, as I recall, there's a Briles there as offensive coordinator as well. Ole Miss, comes in. They have some interesting coaching. There's a lot of interesting coaching changes. Lane Kiffin is likely going to be, continuing, I would say likely to be, to continue to be involved in the offensive play calling with Garrison now as the The co-offensive coordinator is John David Baker. Who else is there? Charlie Weiss Jr. is there. Lane Kiffin will likely still be involved. Pete Golding's there, which should be an improvement over what they've been doing defensively there. But I'm not, LSU should still be a significant favorite here, even on the road. Missouri, I mean, like, you're running through some teams like, look, one of these games, as we're going through these 16, 17 point spreads, is going to be closer than you'd expect. Some of them might be closer than you'd expect because, maybe one is closer than you expect because somebody's better than you were, thought they would be. Another one could just be because of turnovers, kind of the wildness and luck in college football that plays a part. It will be interesting though, too. If possessions get cut down, it will increase the effect of luck on games a little bit, which will be interesting to see too, I think, within college football. Increasing the number of possessions, as the sample size increases, the more likely you are to see, a distribution that resembles the true distribution of outcomes. Anyway, Missouri's another team. I mean, like, as we're kind of running through here, these are all teams that are sort of interesting, but not, I wouldn't say like you're looking at and saying like, oh, they're like, there's an overwhelming shot that they're gonna, that they're gonna end up missing out on, a win here, a win there. I do think that there's a shot here as we're going through that LSU, like I said, like some of these could be closer. The game that they could potentially drop, would you get to? I guess a little bit of a watch out here is when we get to the Army game, with as much as LSU struggled to defend the run last season. And I know that seems like small potatoes, but it's not. I mean, like and Auburn could be interesting with Hugh Freeze there for sure. That's true. Keep an eye on the Army game, because if they haven't fixed the run, defending the run, they could be in trouble. That could also play out in the Arkansas game. That Briles offense tends to be pretty run heavy. I would also say like Lane Kiffin's leaned a little bit into the Briles offense as well in the past couple seasons, and they may be more run heavy as well. They've definitely been more run heavy than you would have expected, I think, given Kiffin's overall reputation. So some of these might lean into some of the weaknesses if they haven't fixed the run defense. The game that they could, of course, drop is the Alabama game. I'm not sanguine on Tommy Rees as an offensive coordinator. I do really like the Steele hire as DC. He was really good when he was at Auburn. He certainly improved that Miami defense last season, and Nick Saban has zero fear that he's going to, stab him in the back and take his job. Florida's an interesting team here with Napier. They've got their work cut out for them, I think, really getting the offense going. I'm interested to see with this Florida team if Napier shows the kind of progression that's going to make you feel like he's on track or not. And then the last game, of course, against A&M. Look, I mean, Bobby Petrino's won. I mean, it did not end well the last time he was at an FBS program, but he has been and has a really good feel for play calling. And it has to be an improvement over what had become very stale play calling on the offensive side of the football for A&M. I'm still not sold on their defensive coordinator, but getting an OC in place, I think, is a big win for them. They have a lot of, they don't have a ton of returning production coming back, as I recall. LSU should be a significant favorite here, but keep an eye out because Petrino could, change the shape of that offense. Maybe DJ Durkin puts it to, I'm not necessarily sold on that concept, but, LSU, this is a tough schedule, but for the most part, missing anybody like really daunting out of the East, I think really helps. The fact that, Alabama's taken a little bit of a step back right now. If LSU gets past Florida State, you have to feel pretty good, that you're like maybe only going to drop one more game along the way. I think the tough thing is if they go out and drop the game to Florida State, that's going to be a tough one because they may drop another game along the way. Like you get through with one loss, you're absolutely, feeling pretty good about your shots getting the playoff, win the SEC title, that kind of thing. So that's it. Let's wrap it up. Like I'm I ate my crow. I said positive things about the marriage of Jaden Daniels and Brian Kelly and Mike Denbrock. It's it worked. It worked last season. Like they all played, they played to what, they all played to each other's strengths and what they wanted to do. And I think that will again carry forward into the season. I think this LSU team has a real, like I said, the table is set for them. Pre-2017 football, I think, plays to Brian Kelly's strengths as a coach. Because he's not an offensive genius. He just doesn't run that kind of offense. So the fact that offenses may have come back to earth a little bit, I think really, really helps set them up for real success. I mean, and I would not have guessed that, Tommy Rees and Mike Bobo were getting hired and, Sarkisian wouldn't figure it out in year 2 at QB at Texas. And, Lincoln Riley still has a lot of work to do on that defense out of USC. So LSU has a really good shot. I mean, they have as good a shot, I think, as anyone in the SEC right now to win a national title going into next year. And I think that makes it like, that feels really fun to me about the SEC is that you can go into next season and nearly everyone is really talented at the very top. Right. But there's just not that massive gap on the coaching staffs that there's been in years past. And so I think that makes it really interesting coming into this year. It should make it really fun. The fact that you have Heupel in Tennessee, sort of lurking out there, you have, potentially Cohen in Kentucky getting, Cohen was really fun. As the OC at Kentucky in his 1 year. They were actually pretty good off defensively last season. The offense just fell off a cliff once he went back to be the OC at the Rams. So him being back, I think, makes it fun. There's just going to be, and of course we'll have somebody, sort of emerge. That's the way it works. My predictions, I'm not a wizard. I cannot actually read the future. Most of these will be mostly right. Some of these will be very wrong. There will be some teams in the SEC that will also be mostly right, and there will be some that will be very wrong. And some of these will, somebody will end up being this fun surprise team, and that's what makes college football a lot of fun as well. So I'm excited. Keep an eye out for this LSU team. I think if Daniels can, play within the system, add a lot with his legs, not get injured, you're talking about a team that I think could absolutely hang on and win. And if they there's two things to sort of watch out for, because I think offensively they should largely be fine. Can they fix the run defense? Can special teams improve? If you're keeping an eye on those things, and they are going to have some teams that are going to pressure them in the run game, that might make some of those games a little bit closer than we might expect. So the truth will come out about this LSU team defending the run pretty early on. I mean, the worst case scenario is Army plays, they don't fix the run defense and then Army's running all over them. That would not be fun if you were an LSU fan. Anyway, let's go ahead and wrap it up here. So you can find all the stats you just saw and a whole lot more at sharpcollegefootball.com. You can find me at BetaRankFB or at Sharp College Football. We have a Pac-12 podcast at 12 Pack Radio. You can find the back episodes of that at sharpcollegefootball.com/12 Pack Radio. I promise I will respond to nasty comments, stuff on Twitter once a week. I don't know. I'm just sort of burnt out on Twitter. It's just not much redeeming about it these days. And I've honestly just really enjoyed not logging in. So I will log in once a week and respond to comments, nasty remarks, anything you want. I'll try to respond. If not, if you ask questions on YouTube, throw out. I mean, I've had some doozies over the years. I had a guy claim to be, when I was used to make fun of Brian Kelly's Notre Dame offense, I had some guy that claimed to have played football at Notre Dame go on a really, really incoherent 5-paragraph essay. That was a hoot. But yeah, drop some comments. Like I said, I've eaten some crow about things I said the prior year about the LSU offense, which largely worked. So I do try to come back and own mistakes. I'm not here to, I'm not going to be one of those people that's going to claim to be right all the time. I think the only thing that would be interesting is can you be right most of the time, some of the time, hopefully most of the time, like, or if you're wrong, that it's like trivially wrong, like, you know, the expected value of being wrong is quite low, that kind of thing. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. I'm going to keep trying to roll through these. I have a personal matter I have to go out for, and I'll be traveling a little bit this week, but I won't have my regularly scheduled LA trip till later on this month, when I'll be on a little bit of a hiatus from doing videos, but I'm mostly going to try to knock out 2 or 3 of these a week. We'll see if I get through that. Who knows? I don't know. I've got them pretty much nailed down as like getting the, you know, graphics put together and everything. So